Before we start, like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel too, so we can hit 20,000 subscribes soon. Let's begin. The story begins in the early 19th century in the kingdom of Joseon. At that time, there was a peculiar job. A person would stand before the public and read romantic stories aloud. The main audience for such readings was women, since they were far more affected by those words than men, who were seen as having no such sentiment. Our heroine was someone who adored reading and was equally passionate about writing and storytelling. In her very first assignment as a reader, she was invited to read for a group of noble women from royal families. She decided to read them something she had written herself. The reading went on for an entire week. But the ending of her story didn't please any of them. In her version, the hero died and the heroine married someone else. A bleak, realistic ending that crushed the romance. It was as if she'd just said, "Oh, by the way, congratulations on your wedding, even if it's too late." Needless to say, the noble women were unimpressed. As a result, she was dismissed and not paid a single coin for her week's work. The next day, her caretaker, Gum, who had been like a nanny to her for years and saw it as her life's mission to look after her, came to wake her. She was already running late for her school because her alarm clock had broken. Her school wasn't a place of academic study. It was a finishing school where young women were taught how to become proper, respectable ladies and prepared for marriage, like any normal girl of the time. But she was the oldest student there because she had no interest in marriage at all. Any suitor who came for her hand, she would quickly send away. That night, frustrated from being forced to attend a school she didn't even want to be in, she sat with her brother Guy outside their home, sharing drinks. She once again tried to convince him, for what felt like the millionth time, that she had no desire to marry. Instead, she wanted to spend her life reading and writing novels without anyone controlling her. Guy told her that if she kept this up, she'd be labeled an old maid, a terrible thing in their society, even if she personally didn't think so. Over time, he said, she'd feel lonely, and when she finally wanted to marry, it would be too late. The train will have already left the station, as we say. Not wanting to upset him, she promised she'd try to accept the idea for his sake, even if it meant sacrificing her own desires. Just then, someone came and asked Guy to come with him. The royal advisor Kai wanted to see him. Ki was the third most important man in the kingdom, right after the king and crown prince, and the highest-ranking advisor in the royal council. When Guy arrived, he found a group of important ministers already waiting. Advisor Ki tossed a book onto the floor, a novel titled Ho Damn. He made it clear he was furious about its contents and ordered that every copy in the kingdom be destroyed before it could spread. Meanwhile, our heroine was having her alarm clock repaired. On her way home through a crowded market, a young boy managed to snatch it and run off. She chased him down, caught him, and pinched his ear, telling him stealing would never help him in life. She asked where his father was, wanting to know who had influenced him to do such things. The boy told her his father was dead and walked away. Suspicious, she followed him to a house where, after knocking, a group of people came out and started beating him before dragging him inside. She couldn't stand by. She barged in to protect him. One of the men tried to hit her, but she reminded him that striking a woman was illegal, and if he touched her, she'd report him and he'd be executed. At that moment, the head of the household, the leader of the men, arrived and scolded his subordinate for trying to hit her, saying that beating a woman was a sign of being less than a man. When she asked why they were treating the boy this way, the leader told her the boy was his slave. His father had been addicted to gambling, and after losing a large bet with no money to pay, he had sold his own son. The man then ordered her to leave, saying the boy was his property and he could do whatever he wanted with him. She didn't want to walk away and leave the child in that situation, but the scene shifts. We now see a young man seated before his tutor, Bo, and his servants. He had just finished writing a novel and was asking for their opinion. To his surprise, they all burst into tears. At first, he thought they were exaggerating, but they told him it was the most romantic and tragic story they had ever read. This young man was named Reem, the younger prince of the kingdom. However, he had been confined inside the palace for 2 years, never allowed to leave. He spent all his time writing novels that the public adored, gathering countless fans. Of course, he never used his real name. He wrote under the pen name Miho. On this particular day, Reem was determined to leave the palace. His newest novel had just been released, and he wanted to see for himself what his fans thought. Bo reminded him that the king had forbidden him from leaving entirely, but Reem argued that his father wouldn't even notice. The people didn't know his face, and the king never spoke of him. Most of the kingdom had forgotten there was even a second prince besides his older brother Jin. As Reem was sneaking out, he ran into Jin. Reem bowed, hoping his brother wouldn't recognize him, but Jin stopped him, telling him to be back by 9 p.m. sharp. Then, with a teasing smile, he let him go, effectively granting permission. Meanwhile, Miho's new novel was proving wildly popular. Girls were rushing to buy it. Our heroine went to see Kim, the owner of the only bookstore in the kingdom, to apologize for what happened with the noblewomen who disliked her story. Kim had been the one giving her reading jobs, but because of her unpopular ending, he had been fined money and gifts and insulted with vicious words. Furious, he refused to work with her again. Later, Reem arrived at Kim's bookstore. He was a deeply romantic soul, but when he saw her, it was as if he had never seen a girl before. He seemed instantly smitten. He approached her, but noticed she was yawning. She quickly apologized, saying the novel was so boring she couldn't stay awake. Reem, not revealing he was Miho, asked if she really thought that about the story. She said yes, that she believed Miho only wrote for money, didn't care about details, and that anyone who enjoyed his work was ignorant and lacked understanding. Then she walked away, leaving him stunned by her blunt critique. At the same time, Bobby was with Kim to collect Reem's share of the novel sales, but Kim sent 2 men after him. They stopped Bobby, asking where Miho was, saying they wanted to meet him. Bobby insisted he didn't know, but the men pulled out a knife to threaten him. While Bobby was facing danger, Reem was with her, still trying to change her opinion of his novel and prove she was wrong. She told him she already knew he was Miho, and that he shouldn't keep following her just to convince her. Then she walked away, leaving him behind. Reem told her that he wasn't Miho or anyone else, but suddenly Bobby came running in, shouting for him to escape, telling her to grab him. They fled from the 2 men, and although they managed to get away, Reem fell and injured his leg. He was furious, not because of the injury, no, but because she had shocked him with her harsh opinion of his novel. Meanwhile, advisor Ki went to the king to inform him about the novel Ho Dam. When the king saw it, he too became angry, saying it would be a disaster if such a book spread. We learned that there was a royal historian named Min sitting outside the door, forbidden from entering. The historian's role was to always be present during the king's meetings with anyone, recording every word to be preserved in history. It was a law that had been followed for centuries. No king could meet anyone without his historian. But Ki went out to Min and told him to stop acting like a child, saying he was meeting the king as a friend, not as an advisor. Min left, unable to argue with him. We then discover that Ki had made a deal with someone to bring him Miho so he could use his fame for money. But when Ki failed to find him, his partner became angry. And this partner turned out to be the same man who owned the boy our heroine had tried to protect. To save himself from trouble, Ki went to her and offered her a job that paid a lot of money. When she went with him, she was shocked to see who was waiting. They wanted her to pretend to be Miho. No one had ever seen Miho's face, so no one would know. They tempted her with a huge sum of money for just 1 night's performance. She refused at first and wanted to leave, but the man in front of her made an offer. He would release the boy from slavery if she agreed to this one request. She accepted, took the boy with her, and left him in Kim's care until she could get him back permanently. The boy thanked her for what she was doing for him. Meanwhile, the king ordered the gathering of both foreign and local novels as a cover, so that when Cdrama was confiscated, no one would suspect a targeted ban. She practiced writing in Miho's handwriting until they prepared the setup. She sat in a hidden spot, her face covered, reading to a group of noblewomen. After finishing, she signed each book with their names. But then, something she never expected happened. Reem himself grabbed her hand and pulled away the curtain hiding her. She immediately recognized him as Miho. She tried to cover her face, but he had already seen and accused her of being two-faced, first insulting his novels and now impersonating him. She stood before the audience and announced she wasn't the real author, pointing to Reem and declaring that Miho was right there with them. His identity was exposed. Suddenly, the place filled with royal palace guards, there to arrest Miho and anyone defending him. She helped Reem and tried to escape with him, but when she realized she would be caught, she handed him over and ran. Reem was arrested, furious with her because now he was imprisoned because of her. The king's men arrested anyone connected to writing novels. They collected Cdrama from every home, placed it among the banned books, and burned them in a public square. She stood watching, deeply saddened. She went to the captain of the guards who had burned the books and asked why the novels had been banned. The captain became angry with her, but luckily, historian Min was standing nearby and told her that they, like her, didn't even know why the ban had been issued. Then Gum came and rushed her home in fear. Guy apologized to Min and left, but then returned to scold her, telling her that if she didn't fear for herself, he feared for her. What she was doing was reckless, and he had already found her a groom she needed to marry. She was shocked and couldn't even argue. Reem was interrogated, but he denied being Miho and had no ID. The questioning was interrupted when someone entered, claiming to be Miho and surrendering himself. They went to see who it was. It was Bo. He was lying to protect Reem, taking the blame so Reem could be freed. Later, Bo returned supported by Reem's maids, barely able to walk after being whipped. He told Reem he would sacrifice his life for him if needed. The king learned that his son Reem had been arrested and that he had been publishing his own novels for a long time without the king's knowledge. The king was furious, ordered all of Reem's books in the palace to be burned, and banned him from writing altogether. He insulted Reem harshly, calling him the disaster of his life and wishing to be rid of him. Reem returned to his quarters, depressed, and later dreamed of the king stabbing him with his own sword. He woke up in distress, unable to sleep from sorrow and boredom. The next day, Crown Prince Jin was surprised in the royal council when advisor Ki proposed placing female historians in Jin's residence to record his every move, using old laws as an excuse. But his real intentions were questionable. As Crown Prince, Jin flatly refused. That night, Jin's grandmother, the Queen Dowager, mother of the king, visited him, saying she wanted to check on her grandson. But in truth, she came to persuade him to accept the female historians, believing in the idea for her own reasons. The next day, Reem decided to discover new talents. He told Jin he had an important errand and wanted him to come along, but there was no errand. Jin just wanted to drink tea with his brother. We learn they loved and cared for each other deeply, especially since Jin admired Reem's novels and had encouraged him before the king's ban. Eventually, Jin announced in the royal council that he agreed to appoint female historians. The honest ministers opposed the idea, saying women had no place in government affairs. Jin explained there would be tests, and only 4 women would be selected. When the male historians heard the news, they were unhappy, but Min was the calmest, responding rationally and saying the women deserved a chance. A public announcement was made about the tests. On the day of her wedding, she sat in her room being forced to get ready. The moment the groom arrived, he told Guy he couldn't marry her and left. At that very moment, she was already sneaking away, heading for the historian's exam against her brother's will. We then learned that the night before, she had asked her groom-to-be to meet her privately. She begged him to back out of the marriage because she didn't want to wed him. He turned out to be a decent man and agreed, without revealing that she was the reason the wedding fell apart. Naturally, Guy was furious and embarrassed by what she had done. Jin personally reviewed the historian exam and came across one particularly bold candidate who wrote without sugarcoating anything. This candidate, of course, was her. The next day, she found her name among a group of women suspected of meeting Jin during the exam, but Jin specifically requested to meet her alone. When she went to him, Min was there as Jin's historian. Upon seeing her, Min immediately remembered her, the woman who had once stood fearlessly and argued with him face to face. He realized she wasn't the type of girl who could lie, but Jin was annoyed with her and told her she was far too blunt. Her writing contained no softening of history at all. Despite her fear of him, she stood firm in her opinion and refused to admit she'd done anything wrong. We learned that the 4 girls who passed the selection were An, Ran, Hui, the daughter of an important royal council advisor, and lastly, our heroine, who still couldn't believe she'd been chosen. Jin handed them their official historian identity cards, confirming they were now royal historians. He smiled at her, and she realized he had been testing her all along. Guy, however, was upset with her and didn't even want to see her. She received her official work uniform and prepared for her first day. She and her fellow historians arrived at their workplace, where they met Ran and An, but the male historians treated them horribly. The only exception was Hui, who received special treatment due to her family connections. The next day, they went to the historian's office, only to be hit by a harsh reality. They were treated as servants, ordered to bring cold water, carry heavy items, and do other menial tasks. She returned home that day exhausted and frustrated. The following morning, she overslept, and when she arrived late at the office, the guards refused to let her in. A kind guard told her there was another way to enter, but warned her that if anyone saw her, she would be in serious trouble. She took his advice, crawling through a small tunnel that led into a restricted palace area. She hid to avoid being seen, but suddenly someone came up behind her, asking what she was doing there. It was Reem. When they saw each other, they were both shocked. Reem quickly realized she was a historian and told her that this place was off limits to her. He threatened to expose her, but she clapped her hand over his mouth, telling him to be quiet and that she would do whatever he wanted. Reem was stunned. It was the first time a girl had ever touched his face. He told her she'd caused him countless problems and even impersonated him. Before the situation escalated, Bo appeared, asking what she was doing in the prince's palace. Reem told him she was the fake Miho, but just then, Reem's servants arrived looking for him. Bo quickly intercepted them before they could expose Reem's identity, telling them that Prince Reem was asleep in his quarters. Bo took her away, determined to keep her from finding out Reem was the prince. Later, Bo warned Reem that she was trouble, a nosy girl who would only cause him more problems if she knew the truth. Soon after, a group of female palace attendants came and told the historians to follow them. The Queen Dowager wanted to see them. They followed her attendants and were initially intimidated by her strict and stern appearance. But in reality, she was kind. She only wanted to drink tea with them and find out if the male historians treated them poorly. Of course, the women complained to her, but the Queen Dowager told them they were rare exceptions and shouldn't even be among men, so they'd have to endure it. After they left, the Queen's attendants surrounded the historians. Their leader slapped our heroine across the face, telling her she would teach them proper manners. A male historian soon discovered what was happening to his female colleagues. They had been beaten nearly to death, and someone had even tried to burn them, all because they'd complained to the Queen Dowager and laughed a little too casually with her instead of maintaining formality. The male historians rushed in just in time to stop further harm. Min scolded the Queen's attendants, reminding them that the female historians were part of an official government department and that the royal palace had no right to treat them that way. After the women left, One male historian yelled at the female historians for following the queen's attendants without knowing who they really were. But Rand snapped, shouting that the men were to blame for constantly mocking them, failing to explain anything about the palace or the job, and treating them like servants. She stormed off, and the other women followed to comfort her. From that day forward, the female historians were treated with more respect. They began to truly learn their craft and received their first trial assignment: to attend a royal council meeting and record everything that happened. The advisors were unhappy about the women's presence, but it was a royal order, so they had no choice. When Min saw their handwriting, he thought it looked like they'd written with their feet. They weren't used to writing quickly. One day, Reem was strolling through the market as usual when he felt someone watching him. He chased the figure, only to find a knife at his neck. The stalker intended to assassinate him. By coincidence, she was returning from work and saw Reem in danger. Reem tried to intimidate the man by telling him he was attempting to kill the prince himself, but suddenly an arrow flew toward them. A masked woman appeared, helping Reem. The would-be assassin fled, and the masked woman chased after him. She ran to Reem to check on him, but he lost consciousness instantly. She took him to a small clinic run by someone she knew, where she learned he had fainted from shock but would recover. She still couldn't believe Reem was a prince. As she tried to wipe the sweat from his forehead, he woke up and quickly left. We then learned that Advisor Key had been behind the assassination attempt. Reem went to tell Jin everything. Meanwhile, she began searching palace records about Reem and found an entry about a prince by that name. Her colleagues walked in and asked what she was doing. She admitted she was looking up information on a prince named Reem. They told her he was indeed a prince, but isolated from the public. No one knew his face because he was locked away for being unstable and fond of killing. Her next assignment was as Reem's official historian. When she went to his palace, she was nervous, not only because of their past encounters, but also because of the frightening rumors. But Reem turned out to be completely gentle, introducing himself as the prince and inviting her to sit so she could do her work. All he did was read, and she had no idea what to record. She wrote down that he simply turned page after page. When her work ended, she tried to leave quickly, but Reem stopped her, saying he wanted to continue working with her. She told him she hadn't known he was the prince and apologized for everything. Reem thanked her for saving him and for not abandoning him, even though he had tried to trick her at the start, and apologized in return. She said she'd thought they could be friends, but that wouldn't be possible now, then left. One day, Guy was leaving work when he saw a woman pass by. He froze as if he knew her well, but was afraid to speak. He quietly followed her home but couldn't bring himself to knock. She sensed someone outside, opened the door, but saw no one. He was standing far away, confirming to himself that it really was her. Then came the day everyone was waiting for, payday. But the female historians didn't receive their salaries. The payroll officers told them the treasury was empty since high-ranking officials got their pay and bonuses first, while low-ranking ones like them were often paid late or not at all. That night, they gathered to drink and ease their frustration. There, they overheard 4 male historians celebrating because one of them had finally received his full salary for the first time since becoming a historian. They realized the system's rules were not applied equally. But Hui wasn't with them. She was with Advisor Key, working as his spy, feeding him information about the royal palace. We also learned that she had a long history with Jin, though their current relationship was strictly formal. One day, a royal messenger came and yelled at our heroine, throwing a paper to the ground. It turned out she had filed a complaint about not receiving their salaries, a serious offense, since such matters should never reach the king. Naturally, she got scolded and couldn't say a word in her defense. Later, when she went to see Reem for work, she couldn't stop crying. Reem quietly left the room to give her privacy, waiting until she finished. When she was done, she thanked him for what he'd done for her, but he told her he hadn't done anything worth thanking. He added that if she ever wanted to cry again, she could come to him and he'd give her all the space she needed. Deep down, he was happy. It was finally a chance to interact with her as just a person, not as a prince. Back at the office, she found an overwhelming pile of work waiting for them. Some of the staff they had clashed with had decided to take sick leave in protest, which meant the rest of the office had to bear the punishment. Meanwhile, Key tracked down the woman who had saved Reem during the last assassination attempt and ordered her killed immediately. That night, the woman, named Mo, heard someone knocking at her door. She went to open it, but suddenly someone grabbed her from behind, covering her mouth and pulled her aside. The door opened. It was Guy. Guy told the men wanting to kill Mo that he was the owner of the house and asked why they were knocking so late. They apologized and left. Once back inside, Mo pressed a knife to Guy's neck, telling him she wouldn't kill him today because he had saved her, but if they ever met again, she would. Later, Guy sat drinking alone, remembering his old memories with Mo back when they studied medicine together. She had always been brilliant in the medical field. Because of the heavy workload, historians began resigning one after another. Min decided he would personally visit the absent, disgruntled employees to apologize and bring them back. She insisted on going with him since she was partly to blame for the situation. They invited the absent employees to lunch and politely asked them to return, but the employees refused, saying they had been humiliated. Min tossed a small book onto the table, saying it contained all the mistakes they had made at work, a record he could use against them one day. She took the book and opened it, shocked at the disasters written inside. The employees agreed to return if Min burned the book, but she soon realized he was a trickster. The book was blank, and she had just helped him with his bluff. Min admitted the mistakes were real, but kept only in his head. She apologized for causing trouble, but he told her she'd done nothing wrong and had every right to stand up for herself. Problem solved. Afterward, the male historians went off to celebrate by themselves, leaving all the remaining work to the women. She went to see Reem again, thanking him once more for helping her and bringing him a new quill as a gift. She asked him to write with it. He began writing, and when she asked what it was, he shyly told her it was a poem. She wanted to read it, but he was embarrassed. It was actually a love letter for her. She tried to snatch the paper, leaning close to him. Suddenly the door opened. It was Beau, announcing that the king was coming. The king walked in to find them standing so close. Both of them froze in panic, bowing immediately. They all left the room with Reem. Reem offered to bring his father tea, but the king coldly replied that his time wasn't to be wasted on tea with someone like him. He had come to inform Reem that smallpox had broken out in a village called Pyongan. He ordered Reem to go there personally to check on the villagers, telling him to either raise his head in pride or die there. Beau, overhearing from behind the door, knew that Reem had never had smallpox. If he went, he'd likely fall ill and die. But the king told Beau to keep quiet, insisting he knew how to handle his son. The news reached the historians. One of them had to accompany Reem, and they were all terrified. She volunteered, explaining that she had already survived smallpox. The Queen Dowager visited the king, furious that he was sending Reem to such a dangerous place. The king, clearly intimidated by her, insisted Reem was his son and wouldn't be harmed. He wanted to prepare him to be king, but she snapped, accusing him of doing this precisely because Reem wasn't his son, meaning he didn't care if he lived or died. It was then revealed that the king truly was not Reem's father. The Queen Dowager warned him that if anything happened to Reem, she knew exactly how to make him pay. She ordered her aide to send a secret message to Mo, keeping her updated on Reem's situation. We learned that Mo was secretly protecting Reem under the Queen Dowager's orders. Gum, however, couldn't believe she was going. She'd never had smallpox at all. She'd lied just so she could travel with Reem. When Guy found out, he went to see her off, telling her to take care of herself. She told him she wasn't afraid of the illness. She was afraid of being away from him. He teased her for trying to soften him with sweet words, and she promised to write him a letter every day because she would miss him. On the day of departure, when Reem realized she was the historian assigned to him, he knew she'd come for his sake. He kept his eyes on her throughout the journey, happy, until his joy turned into jealousy when Min joined them on the trip and openly paid attention to her. They arrived in Hwangji village, where they were welcomed by its governor. The governor of Pyongan was also there, but Reem was forbidden from entering Pyongan itself to avoid infection. He was to monitor the situation from Hwangji, which also had a few mild cases. The Pyongan governor claimed that aid, food and medicine, was being delivered regularly, the situation was stable, and the outbreak was decreasing. Reem heard there was a beach in Hwangji and decided to visit it for the first time in his life. He asked her to join him, not as a historian, but as a friend to share the happy moment. She took off her shoes and told him to take his off too so he could feel the sand between his toes. They ran around like children, splashing each other with water, then sat together as she told him about wonders he'd never seen, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy or the Egyptian pyramids that had stood for thousands of years. Reem was enchanted. That night, when they returned to their lodging, she was shocked to see her former fiancé standing before her. He congratulated her on her new job and said he'd come to see Prince Reem. He pleaded with Reem for help, explaining that he was a government official in Pyongan. He told them he had been away recently and couldn't re-enter Pyongan because of the quarantine, but that the reports being sent out were lies. The death toll was rising, and the aid was being sold at inflated prices while the governors pocketed the money. They didn't care about the dying villagers. She couldn't sleep after hearing this. She wanted to go to Pyongan herself to see the truth. Reem, also sleepless, guessed exactly what she was thinking and told her he would go with her. They mounted their horses and set off, but all the entrances to Pyongan were sealed. If Reem revealed his true identity, the guards would report him and special forces would arrive to remove him at once. Refusing to give up, they made their way through the forest in secret. Reem, furious at the corruption, also couldn't stop himself from asking about her ex-fiancé. She told him they had parted ways, but he pressed to know why. He joked that the man must have been blind to let such beauty go. She admitted she had been the one to end it, so she could focus on her life and work. Suddenly, they hid. A young girl appeared ahead of them. When she saw them, she ran. They chased her to a small hut, where they found her in her mother's arms, both clearly showing signs of illness. She told Reem to wait outside and handled it herself, giving the little girl some food. The mother tearfully explained that they had fled Pyongan because anyone infected was abandoned without food until they died. She begged her to take her daughter. Reem entered upon hearing the crying, but she pulled him aside and said they couldn't take the girl. She was sick, and even if they tried, they might not be able to save her. It was better to wait for proper medical help. They left the hut and returned to Hwangji. Reem was supposed to leave the village soon, but his anger boiled over. He confronted both governors, telling them he would inform the king himself about their treachery. But the governor of Hwangji was shameless. He told Reem he had no problem sacrificing hundreds of lives if it meant saving thousands in the long run. Reem grew furious, telling him they would be put on trial, and walked away. The governors then went to Min, begging for his help and offering to give him whatever he wanted. But Min simply continued writing in his notebook, recording that they had attempted to bribe him, a whole new crime to add to their list. He told them their punishment would arrive in a gift box. Reem finally gained access to Pyongan and was horrified by what he saw. Bodies lay scattered on the ground. Children roamed freely among the infected, with no supervision. Then he noticed a woman with her face covered, cutting a boy's arm with a knife and applying some strange substance to the wound. He ordered her to stop the nonsense she was doing. The woman removed her mask. It was Monday. A doctor stood beside her. Both saluted Reem, but he accused Mo of hurting the boy. The doctor explained that Mo was also a physician and that this was a medical procedure they had invented, variolation. They would make a small cut in the skin, apply an organic substance they had collected, and although the patient would fall ill for 2 days, once recovered, they would be immune to smallpox. Through this method, Mo had saved 7 children, though 2 had died. Reem told her it was too dangerous and forbade her from using it on anyone. Later, Mo and Bo spoke privately. It was clear they knew each other well. Bo told her to take care of herself. She replied that she'd be fine, but the important thing was for Reem to leave the village alive. Meanwhile, she, the heroine, remembered the steps of the procedure Mo had described. She realized she had a small mark on her body, as if the same process had been done to her when she was a child. The next day, she went to help Mo with anything she could. They heard the cries of a young girl and went to check. Mo noticed she was touching the girl without any fear of infection. She told Mo about the mark, thinking it was from the same procedure. Mo asked when it was done, and she guessed about 20 years ago. She was 26 now. Mo looked at her closely, sensing she knew her from somewhere, but kept silent. She later went to bring food and medicine to the woman in the forest hut, only to find the girl dead and her mother in tears. Racked with guilt, she returned in tears. Mo learned what had happened, comforted her, and told her it was fate. She had tried to help, but it wasn't enough. Mo gave her a book about variolation, telling her to study it well. It had been written by Yongan, Mo's teacher. After reading it, she gave it to Reem, telling him that the methods inside were safe and a cure for smallpox. She also told him about the girl who had died. Reem read the book and found it contained all of Yongan's experiments, plus detailed medical recipes. The next day, he asked to see Mo. He told her he had read the book and decided to give her a chance. But first, he would try the procedure on himself, in front of the whole village. If he died, the method would be banned forever. He was determined. What he said would happen, would happen. On the night of Reem's variolation, a group tried to assassinate Mo, but a masked figure and a squad of soldiers saved her and helped her escape. Meanwhile, Reem fell ill, feverish, and everyone thought he might die. She stayed by his side, terrified, until he regained consciousness. He told her he was very thirsty, and she brought him water. Bo rushed in, hugging him and crying, admitting he had been scared he would die. The doctor examined Reem and declared him officially immune to smallpox, but they learned that Mo had been missing for 3 days. Reem authorized the variolation to be performed on the entire population to eradicate the disease. The next day, she, Reem, and Min worked together in the village, feeding children, helping in the kitchen, and assisting with medical duties. That night, during dinner, a little girl brought Reem a special dish her mother had made for him. He loved it. When Reem's mission ended and he returned to the royal palace, he thought his father would be proud. Instead, the king slapped him in front of everyone, saying he had disobeyed orders, risked his life, and that this wouldn't be forgotten. Jin stepped in, apologizing on Reem's behalf, but the king dropped the matter, partly because the historians were recording everything. The Queen Dowager welcomed Reem, telling him he wasn't wrong. He was right, mature, and cared for his people. She told him she was proud of him. Min went home to rest, and we learned he was advisor Ki's son. But Ki was cruel, never acknowledging his son's success, and always belittling him. When Reem returned to work, his colleagues welcomed him warmly. That night, they held a small gathering to eat and drink. By chance, Reem saw her strolling nearby and asked her to sit with him. After a while, he fell asleep. She went to wake him, but instead sat quietly, gazing at his face, handsome and peaceful. The next morning, Reem woke to find her sleeping in his arms. He gently tried to wake her, but she shifted closer against him. When she finally woke up, she panicked and apologized repeatedly. Unfortunately, Bo and the palace servants saw them, realizing she had slept beside him all night. But Reem didn't care. He just said it had been a nice trip, smiling playfully. Meanwhile, a woman barged into Jin's office, his wife. She told him they had been married for 15 years, yet he had never once spent the night in the same room with her. She said she couldn't bear it anymore, feeling unwanted in his life. Ran and An were present, writing everything down at the wife's request. Later, the historians discussed it. They concluded Jin didn't love his wife, but Hui stayed silent, as if she knew the real reason. Reem couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, picturing how she had slept in his arms. When Bo teased him about it, Reem imagined she had done it willingly because she loved him. When she came to record his daily activities, Reem moved closer, ready to confess his feelings. But she quickly left, thinking he was upset with her. He followed her, saying he wasn't angry, and then boldly confessed his love, telling her he wouldn't mind if she stayed by his side. She stood there, shocked, and he let her go. Back in his palace, she was still stunned by his words. Later, she told Gum what had happened without mentioning that it was the prince. Gum guessed the man was smitten with her but pretending to be aloof. Still, she couldn't fully believe it. Reem, receiving no response from her, grew upset. His servants tried to comfort him, but at that moment, she was walking with Min, discussing work. When Reem saw them, jealousy burned through him. He ordered her to come to his palace immediately. Reem wanted her, and when she arrived, he asked if she had feelings for Min, and if she did, what exactly she liked about him. She immediately told him Min was like an older brother to her, and there was nothing between them. Reem then said he wanted to know everything about her, what she liked to eat, who she liked, where she lived, and with whom. She told him she lived with her elder brother, Guy, who loved her, and she loved him back. She loved reading but disliked romance because she found it strange. She had never experienced the feeling of love herself. When she finished describing herself, Reem smiled and allowed her to leave. Word then reached the historians that Advisor Key had entered to meet the king and had expelled all historians. He didn't want any of them present. They spoke about Mo, saying she was working for the Queen Dowager. The king was wary of this, knowing he couldn't act against the queen. She, the heroine, went to record what was happening, but like the others, she was denied entry. Refusing to give up, she snuck to another spot to eavesdrop on the king, but the guards caught her. Brought before the king, he demanded to see her notebook. She refused, saying it was forbidden. News spread among the historians that she had been arrested and thrown in prison. When Reem found out, he wanted to free her himself, but Bo stopped him, warning that if the king learned Reem loved her, he would kill her in front of him. Her brother went to Kai to beg for her release, but Kai coldly said she needed to be taught a lesson and punished. The historians agreed on one plan. They had to free her. None of them went to the royal council, claiming they had run out of paper. Back at the office, they all faked illnesses. Stomach aches, dizziness. Even Min said he had to rush to the bathroom. When the king's men tried to storm the historian's office, the historians stood like an army blocking them. A huge fight broke out, with the female historians joining in, grabbing their brooms and whacking the king's men. Meanwhile, Reem visited her in prison to check on her, bringing food and things to make her comfortable. It turned into a romantic moment. They kept drawing closer until Bo interrupted, warning Reem to leave quickly before the king saw him. Reem left reluctantly, but before he did, she leaned in and planted a small kiss on his cheek. From that moment, Reem was like a boy again, a pure smile lighting his face. The historians turned their office into a fortress so no one could force their way in. When the Queen Dowager heard what happened, she felt proud of the historians for defying her foolish son, the king. Min arrived with a large group of supporters for the historians, praising them as honest people who didn't twist history. More historians joined, staging a sit-in outside the royal palace, demanding her release. Eventually, a messenger came out and announced that the king had changed his mind. She would be freed. Her friends welcomed her with joy, and Gum cried tears of happiness. Guy was upset with himself for not doing more to help his sister. Reem, of course, was overjoyed to see her free. The next day, she prepared excitedly for work. Meanwhile, Reem was consumed by thoughts of her. He couldn't get her out of his mind. When he looked at water, he saw her reflection. When he looked at Bo, he imagined her again. When she arrived at his palace, she found him deep in thought. She tapped him lightly with her quill and asked what he was doing. He told her he was just lost in thought, speaking seriously so he wouldn't seem smitten. She sat beside him, quietly observing too. Reem stood to leave, but she followed, asking why he was treating her this way. He said he didn't want to be annoying, but she told him to go ahead and be annoying, and even allowed him to come closer. He could hardly believe it. One day, Mo came to Guy's house, ready to knock on the door but changing her mind. She turned to leave, only to run into the heroine returning home. The heroine insisted she come inside. Not long after, Guy returned home to find his sister had a guest. When he saw it was Mo, he told his sister to bring their finest drink to serve her. When the heroine left the room, Mo told Guy he had no sisters, then asked who the girl was to him. She fell silent, remembering the heroine telling her that someone had performed variolation on her 20 years ago. Mo's expression changed. She confronted Guy, asking why he had done that. When she left, she glanced sadly at the heroine, her emotions in turmoil. We then learned that Mo had known Guy for a long time. They had both been students of Dr. Yongan. At that time, the heroine had been a young child, and she was Yongan's daughter. One day, the heroine took a sick day from work, only to be surprised by Reem standing outside her home, saying he wanted to see her room. She stopped him at first, rushing to tidy her room and fix her appearance in the mirror. Reem entered delighted. He told her he was proud that this was his girl's room. She was startled by the phrase, and he clarified that he thought they belonged to each other. She told him she had no objection to that. Reem moved closer, and they embraced, the look in their eyes that of first love. Later, they walked together in a romantic spot near the historian's office, only to be spotted by Ran and An. Naturally, they sat the couple down for questioning. They accused her of breaking their trust by not telling them everything. Reem quickly explained that they had only confessed their feelings recently, but Ran and An still couldn't believe their friend had won the prince's heart. They warned her she could be harmed if the king found out. Some of Reem's maids overheard raised voices and thought her friends were fighting with the prince. They rushed in to defend him, claiming she was the one who had flirted with their prince first and chased after him. A huge fight erupted, escalating to shoving and hitting until Bo intervened, breaking it up and warning the maids never to cause such a scene again. The heroine had to confess everything about her relationship with Reem to her friends, blushing furiously. Her friends, however, were thrilled, already thinking about dresses, as any friends would. Then the Queen Dowager went to the king, telling him it was time for Reem to marry and that they should find him a bride. When Reem heard the news, he was frozen, but then saw the heroine standing in the distance. She had heard it too. Realizing she was upset, he went to comfort her, but she excused herself, saying she was very tired. When Reem told her he wouldn't marry anyone but her, she replied that he wouldn't dare defy his father, and that their love was doomed from the start due to the difference in their social classes. She left him. Not long after, Reem came to her office and told her to come with him as a historian to speak with his grandmother. Before the Queen Dowager, Reem said he couldn't marry because he was already in love with another girl and loved her deeply. He would marry no one else. But her reaction was calm and firm. It was impossible. He had to marry a princess to preserve the royal bloodline. She told him to destroy these feelings. The heroine recorded every word, her heart breaking. When they left, Reem told her he still wouldn't give up on her and was determined to marry her. She told him his grandmother's decision would never change and that he needed to accept reality. Reem couldn't believe she was surrendering so easily, unwilling to fight for their love. He left, upset. To protect her friend's feelings, Ran went to Reem in her place, while the heroine went to the Queen Dowager. To avoid Reem, she agreed to take the perfect wife suitability test. The entire historian's office was shocked when they learned that Hui had been chosen as Reem's ideal match. When Hui found out, she was furious. Hui went to Qi and told him she couldn't marry Reem, that she had only agreed to work for him to gain her freedom. Qi told her that first of all, she worked for him, and second, she belonged to him. He would control her and knew exactly how to use her. Hui broke down in tears, unable to resist him. We learned that she and Jin had once shared a beautiful love story, but politics ruined it, forcing Jin to marry a princess like himself. Jin tried to confront Hui about their love, but she told him she couldn't change anything. She was either going to marry his brother or run away from all of them. Meanwhile, the heroine, her friend, didn't know how to act either, watching her friend be forced to marry the love of her life. Mo went to Guy to check on both him and the heroine. Guy told her he was fine and was doing his best to raise the heroine well. Mo asked if the heroine knew the truth. Guy told her she knew her father had been wrongfully killed, but not that he, Guy, had been the one responsible for his death and for denying him justice. As for Reem, he began preparing himself, resigning to the idea of marriage. Even Bo tried to cheer him up, but failed. Everywhere Reem went, he was surrounded by memories of the heroine. Unable to bear it any longer, Reem went to her house, banging on the door like a madman. When the door opened, he rushed in. Seeing her made him freeze. She told him to leave and turned to go to her room, but he wrapped his arms around her from behind, telling her he was willing to give up his title as prince just to live with her. She pulled his hands away and told him that nothing he was saying would work. They were never meant to be from the start. She turned her back to him to go inside, but Reem told her she had to know she meant everything to him. She told him she didn't feel the same way. She went into her room and cried. One day, Reem woke up to loud noises in his room. Bo and the maids were up to something. When he went to them and asked what they were doing, they suddenly began tossing flowers at him. It was his birthday. They celebrated with him. Later, the Queen Dowager summoned him, telling him there was something he needed to do. She took him to the grave of a king named Young, nicknamed the Deposed King, because he had been dethroned for betraying the nation. The current king, Reem's father, had killed him and taken the throne. Reem didn't understand why his grandmother wanted him to visit the grave of a traitor, but she even asked him to pay his respects. That night, Reem dreamed of the deposed king. In the dream, he followed him to a strange place, eventually arriving at a secluded palace. When Reem entered, he realized it wasn't the king at all. It was someone else he didn't know, who called his name before going inside. When Reem woke, he had no idea what it meant. While walking later, he ran into the heroine, who was arranging her work. She guessed he'd had a nightmare and couldn't sleep. Reem told her he didn't understand why his grandmother had sent him to the grave of a traitor. She admitted she didn't understand either. Reem told her he had noticed something. His birthday coincided with the anniversary of the deposed king's death. After talking to her, he felt calmer and walked away. Meanwhile, Jin went to his grandmother, telling her to stop visiting the deposed king's grave. He knew she went there every year. The Queen Dowager replied that if he knew everything, then he must also know she was visiting her son's grave. Jin argued that her son had committed a great betrayal of the country, but she told him he knew nothing. The truth was the complete opposite of what everyone believed. The next day, the heroine visited Reem to check if he was sleeping well or if the nightmares were still bothering him, but he was awake and said he still couldn't sleep. They walked together, and Reem told her he wanted to find a novel called Ho Dam but couldn't because it was banned. He said that once, he had dreamed of the name Ho Dam alongside another name, Yongan. She told him Yongan was the doctor who had written the book on variolation. They realized the rest of the answers would have to come from Mo, who had given them the book. Reem remembered the person from his dream, the one he thought was the king, and retraced his steps from the dream until he found an actual palace. It was locked, as if unopened for years. When he entered, he saw a large portrait of the man from his dream. The inscription read, Hyung. He realized this was the deposed king. The heroine recognized him too. In that moment, she remembered meeting him when she was a child. Back then, he had told her his name was Kdrama. They realized this was the man they had been searching for, but still didn't understand why. The heroine decided to share a secret she had kept all these years. Her father had died 20 years ago, accused of treason. Guy, her brother, had been one of her father's students and had taken her in to raise her. She had kept silent all these years, understanding everything but telling no one. Now, she knew Hyung's name had been her father's alias. Reem comforted her, telling her the truth would come out and justice would be restored. Bo interrupted, telling Reem to go rest. Reem asked him about the day he was born. Was everyone happy? Bo said yes, of course, but Reem accused him of lying, saying the Queen Dowager couldn't possibly have been happy on the day her eldest son died. Bo realized Reem had discovered the truth. Reem immediately mounted his horse, wanting to be alone, hurt by the thought that the king was not his father and had never loved him. Meanwhile, the heroine searched through Guy's belongings and found an old government record written by a historian named Mock. The next day, she asked the other historians about him. They told her he had been a traitor and was executed alongside the deposed king because he refused to hand over the last record he had written with him. Reem went to see the king, wanting to speak with him. The king kept him waiting for hours. When he finally appeared, he was furious to see Reem still there. Reem asked him directly, had he ever loved him or considered him a son at all? But the king didn't answer him, as if he hadn't heard him at all. Reem left, sitting alone and recalling all the bitter memories he had with the king, the countless times he had treated him with cruelty. Tears streamed down his face at his miserable fate. Hui took him into her arms, and she cried too, mourning her own misfortune. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager decided to remind the people once more, spreading Kdrama's novels throughout the entire city. The next day, the royal ministers entered the council chamber and found a large number of these novels. But when Ki saw them, he ordered that all copies be thrown out because the book was banned. He was furious. When the king saw it, his anger exploded as well. Those who had never heard of Kdrama before now learned of it, thinking it was just an ordinary novel. Hui took on the task of burning every copy that reached her, working alongside the historians. But she decided to hide one copy to give to Reem. Reem and Hui read the novel together and discovered that Kdrama had been a kind king who sought to spread knowledge with his friend Yonggan. They had even worked with foreign scholars from France, and together they founded a city filled with learning and peace. He was a beloved ruler until the day the city he founded was burned to the ground. Almost everyone was killed, except for a small handful who managed to escape that day of massacre. That was how Hui finally learned the truth about how her father had died, and why. She went to Guy, handed him the novel, and told him she now knew everything. She wanted to know if the story was true. Guy told her never to bring it up again. He had promised her father to protect her. Later, she went to Kimu and asked if he had read it. He said he had, and that he now knew the king's father had killed her father, the kind doctor, and stolen the throne from the deposed king. Hui told Reem she would take him to someone who knew exactly what had happened. They went to see an assistant of historian Mock, the only one who hadn't been executed because he had surrendered himself. The man was ill-tempered, but when Hui told him she was Yonggan's daughter, his face lit up. He welcomed her warmly, saying her father had been a respectable man and his teacher. She asked why the historian had been executed and where his final record was. The man explained that Mock had been an honest historian who wanted to preserve proof of Kdrama's innocence and reveal the true killer to the world. Before his execution, he had told him the record was hidden in a place called the Green Forest Island. Reem immediately rushed back to his palace, where a large sign read, "The Green Forest Island." They searched for the document but couldn't find it. The next day, Hui arrived with a notebook containing details about the palace and searched for the record. She realized the sign was the only thing that had never changed since the palace was built. She told Reem, who immediately smashed it open. Inside was the hidden record. Bo begged him not to read it, saying he would tell him the truth himself. When Reem learned the truth, he stormed to his grandmother. The guards tried to stop him, but for the first time ever, he drew his sword and threatened them. He entered and demanded to know why she had done this, why she had made him a shunned prince and hidden the truth that his father, the deposed king, had been an honorable man. His grandmother told him that finally, the day she had dreamed of had come. She comforted him, explaining that her son had been called a traitor and killed, and she had been powerless to stop it. The only way to protect him was to keep him hidden in the palace. She revealed that he was the rightful heir to the throne, but she wasn't going to let things end there. She arranged for Min to file an official petition in the name of all the historians, demanding that the king clear Ho-Dam's name and restore the honor of historian Mok, who had died unjustly. When the king heard this, he refused outright, forbidding anyone from speaking about it again. Guy learned of what had happened and told Hui to run immediately. He admitted to her that he was a traitor, and that raising her had been his way of atoning for his sin. Hui told him she knew he had altered history, just as it had been altered in Mok's record. It was revealed that long ago, Guy had been in possession of Mok's final record and was on his way with a colleague to deliver it to the historian's office. But they were kidnapped by Minister Kai, who ordered them to write a false record instead. When Guy's colleague refused, he was killed on the spot. Terrified, Guy betrayed the trust placed in him. Because of that falsification, Ho-Dam, Yongan, and Mok were accused of treason, of allegedly trying to sell the kingdom to the French government, which was a complete lie. On the day Reem was born, Minister Qi went with the deposed king's brother to arrest him, but instead, Qi acted on his own and killed the deposed king. His true motive was to put the brother on the throne so he could have greater influence and power. When Yongan learned of this, he knew he would be next. He asked Guy to atone for his betrayal by protecting his daughter for the rest of his life. From that day on, Guy treated her as his own sister. She understood he had a reason for what he had done, and she continued to love and respect him as her older brother. Because of everything that had happened, Reem was locked inside his palace, forbidden to see anyone. But there were still good people in the kingdom, like the kind commander of the royal guard. When Hui told him everything she knew, he decided to help her. He allowed her to sneak Reem out of the palace. She took him to the people who needed him. Guy and Mo were there waiting, with strong allies ready to support them. They acknowledged Reem as their true king. Mo told Reem that she had served his mother, the queen, and had been by her side until the birth, and even afterward, trying to protect him. They all agreed the time had come for the truth to be revealed. The next day, a massive royal council was convened. Guy entered and declared himself a traitor, presenting evidence from Mok's records, proof that all of this had been done on Minister Qi's orders. Qi shamelessly retorted that Guy should have been executed 20 years ago, but they had spared him. The Queen Dowager also declared that she was a traitor under the law and should be judged accordingly. Qi mockingly agreed with her, which angered Jin. Reem then entered, telling everyone he was not Prince Reem, but Crown Prince Reem, son of King Young, and that he now knew the truth. Their current king had murdered his father. The historians recorded everything. The truth became clear to everyone present. Even Jin supported Reem and demanded justice in the matter. All the righteous ministers sided with him. At the end of the day, Min went to see his father to say goodbye. It was the last time they would meet, because Qi now stood accused before everyone as a murderer and would face his punishment. Guy also prepared for his trial, but at last, he was able to forgive himself for the past, knowing he had helped set things right. Hui continued to acknowledge him as her older brother. Finally, justice was restored. Hodam, Yongan, and historian Mok had their honor returned thanks to Reem and Hui. 3 years later, we learned that Guy was cleared of all charges and had become one of the 2 closest men to the new king, Jin, alongside Mo. The Queen Dowager, however, was unhappy, upset that Reem was not king as she had hoped. Reem had abdicated the throne to his cousin Jin, choosing instead to become a traveler, wandering from country to country as he had always dreamed. We also learned that he had married Hui, and they lived a very happy life together. Hui went on to become one of the most skilled and famous historians, celebrated for her honesty and bravery in recording history. It seems that in almost every historical drama, if the crown prince gives up the throne, everyone survives, and the story ends happily. Subscribe for more dramas like this one, tap the bell icon to get the updates, and don't forget to like the video. Thanks for watching.